EastEnders is at number 3 in my rankings for March 2022. Look, you get John Sen, that terrible producer, out of EastEnders, and wow, EastEnders goes from 7 to 3 in 1 month. What a concept. How do you, look at all the shit I talk about the American soap opera writers and producers. Look at EastEnders. They got rid of their awful producer and already see better TV. So yeah, this was the beginning of the month, was John Sen's last week and a half, I believe, or last 2 weeks. Either way, it was his last week, and thank God he's gone, because as we see with him leaving, the show actually does still have potential. So, he did damage to the show, but I don't think he did irreparable damage. But the next producer, whose work we probably won't see until the summer, has his work cut out for him. Right now, Kate Oates, the head of the division for the channel, BBC, is kind of overtaking the role as executive producer until Chris Clenshaw came on board. So, the big thing was they finally ended the Grey storyline. This has been the biggest issue I've had with this show since I started doing these rankings, and just the biggest issue with the show for 2 years, that they stretched out this story, made him a serial killer, and it was just too much. So yeah, Tina's death came out, that she was the dead body found, and that of course rocked everybody. And the one thing I did like about the climax of the Grey story was that kind of everybody whose lives he's ruined or involved in and killed off their loved ones kind of got into it with Grey in that last day. He kept trying to go on the run. He had a run-in with Shirley, who tried to beat his ass for Tina's death. And in the end, he tried to use Karen, because, Karen has just been up Grey's ass this entire time, believing all of Grey. And Grey wanted to kill himself because he didn't want to go to prison and face everything he's done. But in the end, he didn't. He gets arrested. And thanks to Mitch. And so that's the end of the Grey story. He will admit to his crimes. There will be no trial. He's going away, far, far away. And it's what the show has needed. But the aftermath from the story has worked, because, Mitch and Karen are now going to have problems, because Mitch kind of blames Karen for what happened to their daughter, because Mitch always knew deep down, and he did. He always had that. But Karen always loved Grey and convinced everyone that Grey was just so great. And then we had Keegan blaming himself that he didn't even see what was happening to his own sister. But luckily, I'm glad they gave Keegan a happy ending, because Tiffany came back and they went away together, and that was the ending the two characters needed. Because when Tiffany left a few months ago, it just seemed so empty and like a bad exit for Tiffany. So now with Tiffany leaving with Keegan, I think it's a great exit for both young characters, although I do think both the characters will be missed on the show going forward. It's tough to lose young characters because they have so much future potential. But yeah, that about sums up the Grey story and the aftermath, which I'm just glad the story's over finally, because anybody who's watched any of my EastEnders videos knows I've been bitching and moaning about this story for months now. So I'm happy to see it finally over. I'm glad we're getting a good aftermath, and I will commend the acting from everybody. I think EastEnders probably had the best acting out of any soap opera in March. Everybody brought it in this climax and the aftermath. Everybody acted their asses off. Maybe Marlon on Emmerdale, his stroke, he did some good acting there, but everybody in this storyline did great. We're still getting a lot of Jean and her bipolar disorder. She's been falling apart, and Stacy's been threatening her that if she doesn't get herself help, she's going to keep her kids away from Jean. And Jean's still been trying to Jean is still close to Harvey. She's going to have to move in with Harvey because of all the problems with Stacy. I find this story entertaining as well. I mean, it's making me dislike Stacy, though. I think she's being a little too much. There's better ways to help than threats, right? Oh, I forgot to mention with the aftermath of the Grey stories that Kirat was freed from prison. So That's good. I'm glad we'll see more of Kirat. I just hope he gets his own story. I want to see Kirat in his own story. Other stories going on EastEnders. There's kind of a lot of stories on EastEnders, not as much as Hollyoaks though, and they do a better job of balancing their stories compared to Hollyoaks, just because Hollyoaks just throws everything at you at once, whereas EastEnders has a better balance. So, you know, Kate Oates taking over, I give her a lot of shit, but at least her show seems more balanced than Hollyoaks. Another big story has been Tommy with the bullies at school. I like the twist and turn this story took because, you know, Phil was kind of talking him up, trying to get him to stand up to the bullies before he got arrested. So Tommy went to school with a knife to kind of scare the bullies off, which seemed to work until they attacked him anyway when he put the knife back in his backpack. But then he hits one of the kids with his backpack, and the knife ends up stabbing the kid accidentally. But I liked all of that. Kat got the cops involved on that, though, and Kat's very upset with Phil because of all that has happened here. Not really a main story, but I'm glad to see Jada get more screen time. She's been throwing a party behind Sharon's back. I think the character of Jada has a lot of potential. I want to see where they go with her. I hope they continue to flesh her out more because we are starting to see the character get fleshed out, and I'm happy about that. So I hope she is one of the new characters that stick around with the new producer coming up. The last big story, well, I forgot to talk about Mick and Janine. You know, they've been playing cat and mouse, or Janine's been the cat and Mick's been the mouse. They ended up kissing. That didn't get too much follow-up, though. So we'll see if Mick and Janine continue to be close after all that Janine has done to kind of get to this point with Mick. She has been doing a lot of manipulation. And then there's Chelsea, who after the Grey aftermath has wanted to give up her and Grey's kid because of all that has gone down. You know, I didn't give it enough credit that they tied Grey to Chelsea when Chelsea's father is also like a killer, and there was just a lot of parallels between Chelsea and her mom. And so in hindsight, I just hated the Grey story so much that I couldn't give it credit. But tying that story to Chelsea and tying Grey and Chelsea together kind of worked. I just didn't like how weak they made Chelsea when Chelsea knows all of this. And she knows her mother went through it. I just think she would have been better prepared for that story. So they didn't give the character of Chelsea good enough writing in the story, which was the big problem. But tying Grey and Chelsea together, in theory, I see why they did it. Lastly is Stuart returns home. Stuart did not get cancer treatment, does not want surgery because he wants to go the natural route. And that, of course, is upsetting Rainey because he's going to die if he doesn't get his cancer surgery. And then Bernie returns, and she's carrying their child, or the child she's supposed to give up to them. And but she's kind of not wanting to do that because Stuart has cancer. She goes into labor, has a decision to make. And that's when Rainey finally gets Stuart to accept that he needs to have surgery so that they can have a life together, and Bernie will give them the kid. So another good story there. So, you know, the stories are getting climaxes. Then they need to start setting up the new stories. But I don't know when Clenshaw's, I don't even know his name, the new producer, when he takes over. I don't know if it's like June, July, I don't know. So we still might have April and May where it's just Kate Oates kind of continuing to just do the aftermath of the mess that John Sen created. But we're getting a good aftermath, at least. I like it. I think it's become one of the most watchable soap operas in March. I think they have decent enough momentum in April. But, you know, if they're ending and climaxing all of their stories, I don't know where that leaves the show over these next few weeks. Because if all the stories are climaxing, we could just get boringness where we have to set up new stories. But for now, EastEnders is third, and I think it is already far better without Johnson attached to it.